What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about what Trump's victory will mean for the UK. That's right, it happened. Whether you like it or not, Trump has won the US presidential election, as you might have heard by now. Certainly we are hearing about this and talking about this nonstop here in the United States. And of course, what the ramifications of our decision is for this country, what will happen here. But one thing we don't really talk about so much here is how this decision will affect other countries like the UK. So today, I'm actually very interested in hearing the British point of view on this. And I want to do that by checking out this video by TLDR News, What a Trump Victory Could Mean for the UK. Let's check it out.
Former President Donald Trump will once again move into the White House and become the 47th President of the United States.
Yeah.
Well, Trump has been president before, and usually this will provide us with some kind of idea of how his next term will play out. His unpredictable nature means that the next few months are going to be even harder than ever to predict.
That's an interesting statement, but I suppose technically true. His unpredictable nature will make the future hard to predict. And that is certainly something Americans are grappling with. And I imagine people in the UK are also grappling with. I find this all to be very interesting from a news point of view. Because believe me when I say, when Keir Starmer became the UK Prime Minister, there was really no big news story about that here in the United States. A lot of average normal Americans didn't really even hear about the UK election or let alone think about how it will affect us. And yet I think the flip side of this is that a lot of people in the UK and around the world are thinking about how Trump becoming president of the United States will affect your country and the world and all that. It's just interesting to me how different that is, because Americans don't really seem to care or think about other world leaders and other elections around the world, and a lot of other countries really do take a lot of notice and concern about our election. I think, rightfully so, and it's good. I think that's a good thing that other countries are much more informed and aware of what's happening. And I don't know. I can't, but believe me, us Americans definitely have taken notice of this election.
That makes things tricky on this side of the pond. As the new Labour government, we're desperately trying to work out how they can maintain the so-called special relationship with a man that stands for virtually everything they stand against.
Oh.
So in this video, we're going to go through the work that the Labour government has already been putting in to try and build bridges with the president-elect. Before moving on and having...
Right, okay, so apologies for pausing this so much already, but I don't know, there's so much to say about this. So they're talking about how the UK government stands against what the Trump government stands for, and they're talking about from a political point of view. I don't understand all that much about UK politics, I'm going to be honest, but I know the current UK majority government is the Labour Party, and the UK Labour Party is much, much closer to our Democratic Party. It's center left, or at least left leaning for sure, which is pretty much the opposite of the Trump Republican Party that's now going to come into power. That's what they're getting at here, that our government's ideologies and political parties are literally opposite ends of the spectrum, basically. And how the UK is going to have to kind of grapple with that, while also making an attempt, because at the end of the day, like, I do agree with what they're saying. On some level, the UK has to extend out, like an olive branch, and hopefully us as well, to the UK, and try to work together and go about business as normal and try to make this whole thing work out the best that it can for the world. And we'll see what that looks like.
Having a look at what exactly this means for both the British government and the UK as a whole. Please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos.
Yeah, this is a very good channel, by the way. TLDR UK News. Very good, up-to-date news. I'm so happy they made a video about this, actually, how the Trump victory is going to affect the UK, because I was really, really interested in hearing about this.
Now, it's fair to say that Labour and Donald Trump don't have that much in common. In fact, the current Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is in a bit of hot water this week, as some of his old tweets about the president-elect have resurfaced. In them, Lammy is shown to have described Trump as a racist KKK and Nazi sympathizer, and a liar and a coward for cancelling a visit to a US war cemetery in France to mark Armistice Day.
Okay, so already, this is a lot of the rhetoric you're hearing here in the United States from certainly the Liberal Party, and people who do not support Donald Trump have, like, this is not shocking to me to hear this sort of rhetoric and criticisms. I didn't necessarily know that also there were people in the UK with this exact same point of view, but this doesn't shock me in the slightest, honestly.
For cancelling a visit to a US war cemetery in France to mark Armistice Day. Given that it will primarily be Lammy's job to maintain the UK's relationship with the US, this isn't exactly the best start. Presumably anticipating this problem, though, both Starmer and Lammy met with Trump a few weeks ago in order to try and establish something of a diplomatic relationship.
Oh, they did?
It seems that this meeting went well, too, with Trump sources claiming that it was taken as a good gesture.
Wonderful. Okay. I didn't know about this. This is this is what I'm talking about, where I say a lot of Americans, myself included, are not that informed about international politics. Starmer actually met with Trump weeks ago. So that was before he was even elected, like in anticipation of winning. And apparently they had a good meeting, whatever that means. It's kind of vague, but that's kind of nice to hear.
However, there are recent reports that Trump has been privately critical of Starmer as very left-wing, and has echoed some of Elon Musk's strong criticism about Starmer and his government. In fact, the presence of Trump superfan Elon Musk in Trump's governing circle could prove problematic for the Trump-Starmer relationship, given that Musk has fully jumped into the online debates about the state of the UK. Similarly, Trump's warm relationship with Reform UK leader and political opponent of Starmer, Nigel Farage, could create some hiccups. It's not all about personality, though. Policy will play an important role, too. It's the economic sphere that the UK will perhaps feel the biggest impact of the incoming Trump presidency. As part of the unorthodox economic agenda that Trump has set out, he's floated implementing a 60% tariff on Chinese goods.
Yes, this is like one of the biggest, and you could say most controversial things that Donald Trump ran on, campaigned on, and was voted into office for, and you better believe he's going to do this, I'm sure, because this is, I mean, let's face facts, the majority of Americans, like this election was not particularly close. Like Donald Trump won pretty convincingly, which actually shocked a lot of people in the United States. A lot of people didn't see this coming necessarily, or at least thought this would be a lot closer. I think every demographic in the United States increased in voting for Donald Trump, and by that I mean I think only college-educated, degree-holding women voted less for Donald Trump this time around. Every other demographic, age, gender, race, social class, increased at least some amount in their voting for Donald Trump, and he won the popular vote, which shocked a lot of people. So you better believe he's going to keep the promises that he made, because, of course, he would interpret that as, I was elected running on tariffs. I'm going to do it, because that's what the people want or voted for. And the ramifications of this on other countries are, of course, pretty substantial. If taxes are going to be increased, or the amount that foreign countries are going to have to pay to import their goods into the United States, you're going to have to raise the prices on your goods to pay for those tariffs, which are probably going to increase the prices that Americans have to pay for goods. The whole philosophy of tariffs, I believe, I'm no expert in this, but we're going to see pain in the short term. Prices are going to increase for Americans, for foreign goods, which is going to encourage us to purchase domestic-made goods and, in theory, possibly stimulate our economy or encourage people to buy American-made products and services, which is going to do something good. It's all theory. I don't know. I try to understand some of these things as best I can, but there you go.
And a flat tariff of up to 20% on imports from the rest of the world.
Wow.
According to analysis by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, the UK could be one of the worst hit countries by Trump's tariff policies and potential subsequent trade war. With the think tank
Really?
estimating that over 2 years, the UK's inflation rate would be 3 to 4 points higher, while interest rates would be 2 to 3 points higher.
The UK is going to be hit one of the hardest by these price increases. I did not know that the UK in particular would be affected by this so much. I've certainly heard about this targeting Chinese goods imported into the US, but this is news to me here.
Additionally, the UK's growth is projected to be lowered by 0.7 percentage points and 0.5 percentage points in just the first 2 years. Although, according to Labour's Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, Trump's tariff plans are something that the UK government has been preparing for. Nevertheless, Trump evidently
I feel like that's the sort of the message of the day and the week and the years to come. Everyone's just desperately trying to get ready for all this, and you don't necessarily know what's going to happen for sure, or what's going to happen. You know, a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world these days. Now Donald Trump has been elected, so yeah, uncertainty is certainly at an all-time high. I don't know. I I think I laugh because that's kind of all you can do. Otherwise, you just live in a current state of stress and worry and uncertainty, and I don't know. All you can do is try to understand and make the best of things, I suppose.
a hurdle to Starmer's core mission for economic growth. Trump's potential trade war with China actually touches on the next area of potential UK-US friction that we're going to discuss, a difference in China policy. The Labour government, having launched a fresh review of the UK-China relationship, is seeking to take a pragmatic approach to China, one that acknowledges and confronts its differences with Beijing, but also regularly engages and works together over key global issues.
Okay.
On top of this, Jonathan Reynolds says that he's open to reviving the trade dialogue with China. Now, this could put the UK in an awkward collision course with the Trump White House, as it hardens its rhetoric on China and may look to pressure allies into taking a more hawkish position too.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't know whether this is going to be true or not. I would be inclined to think, the United States, we can take as critical a stance against China as we want. I think China, if I'm not mistaken, maybe has pretty substantial tariffs, or if not tariffs, other things that make it so the U.S. has to pay China to do business, and we're trying to match that energy or something. I could be wrong about that, but China might do something with tariffs or taxes with imported goods, and we want to do it back to them. And I don't know why we would care what the UK does. I certainly don't. I don't care. I think the UK should do what's best for the UK. So this is an interesting point for me, and I hope we do not make any kind of pressure on the UK to have any kind of relationship with China. I think you should do what's best for you.
Now, while Keir Starmer and David Lammy have reiterated their belief in maintaining the so-called special relationship with the US and working constructively with Donald Trump, despite their differences, a new Trump administration could end up pushing the UK closer to the EU if Starmer takes the opportunity. Trump's victory has evidently spooked European leaders because of his past comments on NATO and Russia, and vindicated those who have urged Europe to free itself from its security reliance on the US and develop its own strategic autonomy. The return of Trump therefore presents an opportunity for Europe, as we explained in our recent TLDR EU video, and therefore opens the door for the UK to take a more leading role in building a new European security apparatus.
See, this is the kind of stuff we don't hear that much about in the United States. This is interesting to me as an American, hearing that the UK and Europe as a whole, once you hear that Trump is going to become our president, it kind of makes you want to maybe take a step back and focus on how can we become safe and secure and successful without relying on the United States so much, because I think it comes back again to that unreliability, that unpredictability that, for better or for worse, the Donald Trump administration is kind of synonymous with. I think Americans vote for Donald Trump in part because of that unreliability or that shaking things up. If we don't like the trajectory of where our country or our government is going, Donald Trump is certainly a way to derail whatever trajectory we're going on and go off on some completely different trajectory. Whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that's going to be the effect. We're going to do something different now. That is for sure. Time will tell if that was a good or bad decision. But it makes complete sense to me, even as an American, that Europe maybe doesn't want any part in that unpredictability, that sort of, that's the word of the day, I think, unpredictable. Like, Europe is trying to and the UK is trying to figure out, maybe we should, try to plan on a future where we don't rely on the US as much, because we don't know what the future holds. Yeah.
This would come at a financial cost, though, meaning that the UK and its European allies would face pressure to crank up defense spending, especially if Trump does outright quit NATO, or if he scaled back US support for Ukraine. What's more, Trump's attitude towards the environment could also push the UK even closer to Europe. During his first term, Trump pulled the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which committed signatories to reduce their carbon emissions to net zero by 2050.
Right.
Now, this obviously runs counter to the Labour government's plans. Upon being elected Prime Minister, Starmer used his first speech at the UN General Assembly to reiterate that his government would be a global leader on the environment.
Right.
How possible this would...
That's a big difference between the UK and the US, with the Labour Party in the UK focused on climate change and environmental protection. United States, under Donald Trump, not so much, probably.
be while trying to cozy up with a man who's described climate change as a big hoax is certainly questionable. Additionally, while Biden rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement on the first day of his presidency, there's a real possibility that Trump could, for the second time, pull the US out of it. According to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, such a move could cripple global climate cooperation. As a result, a UK seeking international cooperation on climate change will have to look elsewhere than a Trump-led US for a constructive partner.
Right.
Ultimately, Trump's return is just the latest shakeup of an already turbulent international picture. Take the G7 group of advanced economies, for example. It's quite likely that within just a few years, Starmer ends up as the only left-of-center leader in a notably right-wing G7, with Trump heading up the US and Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and likely incoming conservative governments in Germany and Canada.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's something I haven't really thought about. I don't know what this is gonna mean for the future of the world, but a lot of the world governments and world leaders are starting to vote and lean right, at least in this election cycle, for for the foreseeable future, I suppose, except for the UK, which has the left-leaning government. Yeah, that's true.
And also possibly France. So while Trump may prove to be the most erratic international partner, Starmer will need to get used to working constructively with those from different political camps if he's going to be successful.
Right, right. That's a very good observation too. That's kind of, I guess that's one of the things people in the UK are kind of thinking about, maybe worried about, I don't know, is that the Trump-led government of the United States is very, very different from the UK government, ideologically, and with a lot of our policies and our leadership, obviously, very, very, very different. But in a perfect world that is constructive for both of us, we are hopefully working together and getting along and trying to make something work and be productive. What that will look like exactly might be tricky, but hopefully it happens.
Now, these stories about the US election and the impact of Trump aren't likely to go away anytime soon. As the international effect of Trump begins to emerge, the impact of a Trump presidency is only going to become a larger and larger issue. When it comes to following that chaos, though, thankfully, there's Ground News, a website and app developed.
Oh, what is this? I think this is an app for their... Oh, I think that's an ad for their app or something.
All backed up by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. For instance...
Oh, is that it? Are they just talking about their little news app here?
But literally no coverage from the left, meaning that it's likely a story that those on the left missed entirely. The framing also differs significantly.
Oh, what is a story the left missed out on?
Of debt, despite raising...
What is this?
Take this story about the Harris campaign ending with about $20 million of debt, despite raising $1 billion during the campaign.
Right.
It's been reported on by 22 outlets.
Right, I heard about that actually. Kamala Harris's campaign raised like $1 billion from donors. And somehow they ended up like in debt. I don't know if it was them trying to pay Oprah and Beyonce or whoever to talk at the rallies, if they just cut a check they couldn't cash. But I heard that the Harris campaign raised $1 billion, but they spent all that and they're in $20 million of debt. Kind of hard to believe, geez. But it's kind of mind-boggling on both sides how much money was spent on campaigning in the United States. My God.
For each candidate, including the major platform issues and even blind spots. Stories under...
Okay, I think that's it. I think they're just talking about their little news thing here. Well, there you go. I mean, this is really interesting stuff. It was really interesting hearing how this might affect the UK. A little bit on the British sort of perspective of this. Certainly, it was clear to me, at least from the little snippets, that the UK government is not stoked about the Trump presidency and the outcome of this election. I don't know. It's just really nice to hear a sort of outside perspective on this and how this could affect the world and the UK. That's really important stuff for Americans to think about. Yeah, because this is the future. Like, it happened, and we'll see. So anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment. If you're British, this affects you. So feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts on the U.S. election. And that'd be really interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to the UK and learning about UK culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.